Good evening, Shabbat Shalom, and thank you for joining us on Living Waters, Falling Deeper in Love with God's Word. I am Lauren Cruz, one of your hosts.
And I am Stephanie Pavlantos. Thank you for joining us. And Shabbat Shalom, even though we are not live, we are pre-recording this, so you know. We won't be able to answer questions directly or, you know, put some of your thoughts and questions down there below us. But, you know, we might get a chance to, at least I'll be out of town. Mm-hmm. Well, are you in town?
I am in town. I have a very busy weekend, but I'm in and out.
Yeah.
It's just super busy weekend.
Yeah. So if you have a question, you could still leave it, and then we'll get to it.
We will. And we do get alerts when people send messages and things like that. So yeah. And we are actually recording on Rosh Hashanah, and so Shana Tova, Happy New Year. Keg Samach, I hope I said that right, and all the greetings. And so you did something last night, right?
Yes. So we had our family, church family, and, you know, or whatever, you know,
congregation.
I've gotten in trouble for using the word church, but it's just something I can't get away from it. So anyway, our church family was here and some other people, and so we celebrate. We started the celebration last night. It was the first evening. Today's more of a Shabbat, and it's tough sometimes. Just like, I know you had to work, but for me to just not do anything and not be tempted to go and, like, you know, we've had all this nice rain and the ground is finally soft, and I was thinking, like, I should do some weeding. Oh no, but we honor the Shabbat today because the Lord tells us to in Leviticus 23:23. So that's what I'm doing, at least because I don't work out of the house anyway.
Lucky. So, I didn't take the day off. I did work. However, dinner is cooked in a crock pot tonight, so I don't have to do anything with that. And so we're just having a nice meal. That's really all we're doing. I'm hoping to blow my shofar at some point because Stephanie and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, and there's actually a difference between Rosh Hashanah that everyone seems to celebrate and Yom Teruah, which is mentioned occasionally but not as often celebrated. So
and this it's interesting because if you have like first fruit, you know, starting with Passover, first fruits, and you know, and different you know, Shavuot, and then Sukkot. You know, I'm not saying them in order, but basically they all have names. But this one does actually not have a name. It tells us to make this day a memorial. You know, these 48 hours a memorial, and on this memorial we are to. It's a day of blowing our trumpets and shouting. And that's actually where then they get Feast of Trumpets from. But it's actually a day of trumpets or a day of shouting.
Right.
And I always teach that goes back to Mount Sinai.
Yep.
And right there in 19, like verse 13, when God himself was blowing the trumpet, and he was forming like this assembly. He was going to assemble all the people. Moses was doing it, obviously, but they were assembling before the mountain for the Lord to give them the, you know, orally give them the 10 Commandments and whatnot. So
and I think it's also the celebration of when God is enthroned as king.
Yes, definitely
king, and so they made the covenant with him for him to be the king.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also, you were mentioning
so I know I did a little bit of research. I'm actually speaking Saturday at a group, and so one of the things that I was specifically asked is, you know, kind of explain the fall feast. And so it's called a day of shouting or a day of trumpets, or it's also called the day by which no one knows the hour or the day. And that's in relation to watching the moon. So when the moon officially notes, nobody knows the day or the hour.
When there's a sliver of light.
That's a sliver. And so that we see that in the Bible, in the New Testament, and people don't even realize that it's feast language. It's language, Yom Teruah. The other thing is that it's very common to wear white on Rosh Hashanah. And white is actually mourning clothes. Those are clothes that you would wear mourning, because Rosh Hashanah Yom Teruah kicks off the 10 days of awe. I believe it's days of awe, where we are repentant. We are asking for forgiveness. We ask others for forgiveness. We ask Yah for forgiveness.
Right.
And we wear white. And so I think it's interesting that the bride of Christ is given white robes for her righteousness. But if Yeshua does, or Messiah does, return on the Feast of Trumpets, as many ask, or I think that they would, it would make sense that we would be given white robes, because Yom Teruah alerts us to begin mourning our sin and to be repentant. And then we go through Yom Kippur and all that. We would be wearing our white robes. So,
and it's interesting, because when the Day of Atonement comes in 10 days, you even have these priests were highly kind of decorated. They have beautiful clothing on, and the ephod and stuff like that, and the gold band and cover, and yet they basically stripped down to the white under that they wore under the robes,
right,
and the white wool. I believe, was it linen or wool? But anyway, they stripped down to that to go in to the Holy of Holies. So they didn't go in with all their kind of pomp and circumstance.
Yeah, the refinery.
Yeah, and they had to be clean. And they had to do the mikvah and stuff like that. So it's very interesting when you draw all the comparisons to what's going on.
Yeah, we read things in the New Testament, we don't even realize we're reading feast language.
Yes,
and it's important to note. I think so.
It is. Yeah. And I think that's our biggest, which you and I have always tried to help our audience, or anybody who's, I guess anybody who's listening. If you happen to come on here and hear us, and like, who are those two women? And so, we try to give you the different languages of the Bible, and we're not talking like foreign language. We're talking about creation language, and it's
theme
not
language.
Just, so it's not just in Genesis 1, but there's creation language elsewhere. There's, covenant language and kingship language. So, so
it's good stuff.
It really helps you put the Bible together and understand what's going on.
I think so too. We had one other comment. I think we were talking about that Rosh Hashanah actually is not a biblical holiday.
Right.
It's not. I don't even believe it's mentioned in the Bible.
It comes out out of Judaism.
Right.
And that is, they're celebrating in Israel. It's basically, and I'm sure others here. I'm not saying that no one here does it. I'm sure the Jews would do it
here as well. Right.
And if you follow, we follow the calendar that we, people are different calendars, but it's not obviously the Western calendar. It's the Hillel or some other calendar. And so basically we're following this as the new year, but it's the civil new year. It's not the biblical new year.
Yeah. The biblical new year is actually Nisan, which is Passover.
So. Sometimes for me, all the different calendars, there's like 7 different calendars that anybody, I guess for different reasons they choose their calendar, thinking that calendar is most accurate.
Right.
And that's all well and good. It's just, it gets confusing to me sometimes.
It does. And it's confusing too, like New Year. It's not really the New Year. It's one of the New Years. They have 4 New Years. It is confusing, but so we think of it as the fall feast, and then it's the final, the new. If you want to say that the feasts start in the fall, it would start the new feast cycle. I mean, I don't know. There's just a variety.
Yeah, and of course we talked. I mean, I always keep this book handy.
I know.
This is still an excellent book if you're interested in finding out more about how they manifest themselves and how Jesus fulfills them in the future. That's still to come. So definitely a great book.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, I guess we should get on our book that we're doing now.
Yes.
Yep.
On Purpose.
We're on the last chapter. We're actually on the last chapter of On Purpose. It's Understanding God's Freedom for Women Through Scripture by Julie Zine Coleman. Mm-hmm. And this week we are doing chapter 10, which is going to cover a pretty good chunk of scripture. It's, if you have your Bible and you want to read along with us, it's 1 Peter 2:12 through 1 Peter 3:9. So it's a pretty big chunk, but it's not a long chapter. So we don't have too much to go into, but anyway, I'll read it if you would like, and you guys can follow along. Any translation, you'll be able to keep up. But it says, "Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in a thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify them on the day of visitation." So that kind of starts the whole section, and it's important. So it's important. "Submit yourselves to the Lord's sake, for the Lord's sake, to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority, or to a governor as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praises of those who do right. For such is the will of God, that by doing right you silence the ignorance of foolish people. Act as free people, and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bondservants of God. Honor all people. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the king. Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are harsh. For this finds favor, if for the sake of conscience towards God, a person endures grief when suffering unjustly. For what credit is there if when you sin you're harshly treated, you endure it with patience? But if you sin and are harshly treated, but if when you do what is right and suffer for you patiently endure it, this finds favor with God." Sorry about that. "For you have been called for this purpose, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you would follow in his steps. He who committed no sin, nor was any deceit found in his mouth, and while being absolutely abusively insulted, he did not insult in return while suffering. He did not threaten, but kept entrusting himself to him who judges righteously. He himself brought our sin in his body on the cross, so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. By his wounds we were healed. For you were continually straying like sheep, but now you have returned to the shepherd and guardian of your soul." Okay, here we go. Here's the hot part. In the same way, so you have to think about what he just said. "In the same way, you wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won over without a word by the behavior of their wives, as they observe your pure and respectful behavior. Your adornment must not be merely the external, braiding the hair and wearing jewelry and gold or putting on apparel, but it should be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. For in this way the holy women of former times, who hoped in God, also used to adorn themselves, being subject to their own husbands, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And you have proved to be her children if you do what is right without being frightened by any fear. Your husbands, in the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir and the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. To sum up, all of you be harmonious, sympathetic, loving, compassionate, and humble, not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead, for you were called for the very purpose that you would inherit a blessing." It's a lot.
That was a lot.
That was a lot.
But it's good, and if you're tracking with what he's saying,
yeah.
I don't have the verses because she was reading it from the book,
right?
But it says, "For you have been called," on the bottom of 167. "For you have been called for this purpose." So she repeats that.
Yeah.
But she's also, putting here, who committed no sin, nor was any deceit found in his mouth. And while being abusively insulted, he did not insult in return. While suffering, he did not threaten. So when you read on in that, and then the next paragraph, in the same way. So you brought that up because what is, I don't, and just before anybody says, oh, so, if you're an abused wife, you're supposed to just put up with it and just deal with it and go along, hoping that your husband will come to the Lord. I think we're not talking about abuse. We're not talking about violence. We're talking about, a husband who is not a believer. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
So, yes. So there may be some faults of that man. There may be some problems in the marriage, whatever. But basically the point is to be the kind of wife that will lead him to Jesus.
Right.
And not be a doormat for his abuse. So.
Right. And she gave a bunch of information before she finally got 2 wives and 2 husbands, because there's a lot of context that you have to understand before you get to those verses.
Yeah.
So, it's talking about slaves and masters and servants and husbands and wives. And
and it's good because some background here that we don't often think about, that we're going to see Peter say some words like respect the authority, respect the king, the emperor and that kind of thing. But when you realize that Peter wrote this during the
persecution,
during the reign of Nero. And he's like, basically, respect the king, or I'll look for the verses here, but it's pretty amazing what he says, considering who's in power.
Right.
And that crazy man, was off his rocker a bit.
Yes, he was.
And so I think it's important that if he, like here, submission to authority, but I also think this is very important for believers as a whole to understand, because we see a lot of believers who say really hateful things and really nasty things about the sitting president, whoever that president is. And I think this applies, be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or governors. So, honor everyone. And he even says, honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor, this crazy emperor. And that he had, and he's still saying honor the emperor. It's about authority. And that's kind of where he's getting in with what we just read. But I think it's important that he is very much telling his followers, these are even us, honor the president. Don't badmouth. Don't make, say things that we shouldn't. We want to bring people to the Lord.
And that,
I think, own actions.
So here's the key point. And I know we're going to go into the chiasm and all that, but it starts off by saying, keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles.
Yeah.
So that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe, glorify God on the day of the visitation. So all of this, whether you're submitting to servants to their masters, or husbands to the wives, or wives to the husbands, or to a governor, or to the emperor, you're doing it to put our best foot forward as believers.
Yeah, and even if
best behavior as believers.
Yeah, we may not have masters, but we have employers.
We do.
So we still need to act like believers in the workplace. We need to put on and let people understand and see Jesus in us. And by bad mouthing everyone, that's not doing it. That's falling short of our job as believers.
Okay. So on page 169, she begins by focusing on it. She definitely
she tells a story about a guy.
Right. She does start with a story. Basically, it was like a guy that she had to catch a ride with, but she wasn't real sure. She
already knew how he stood about women in authority or women with any kind of leadership. And she wasn't married yet. And she's like, oh, I didn't want to be around them. But
and she was very upfront with him. He asked her, he's like, well, you know, what are your views, kind of thing. And she answered him very frankly.
Yeah.
And honestly, and they ended up laughing about it, kind of. So it was.
Yeah, he's like, why don't you like me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the next page, on page 170, she starts going into a little bit more of the context of it.
And she always gives a little bit of the background, which I kind of did already. But it's just, you have to background. I think whenever you read a chapter, you should at least know the background of
I think so.
Who wrote it, when they wrote it, what was going on in their world at the time that they wrote it.
She makes the point that there are very specific relationships that would this is what was going on in the world. So a government submitting to the government, slaves and masters, husbands and wives, and then husbands and sons. Like those are the primary relationships that people would have understood and interacted and responded to. Like if I'm going to talk to you about this, you know, this is something that most people would be very, very common. So that's one of the reasons she kind of puts that forward as it's one of the reasons why Paul specifically addressed these relationships and mentions them as examples, because they would have been very commonly discussed.
Yeah. And I thought it was very interesting because she gives some of the background. She helps you understand. And I didn't really know this, but even with, and I know I'm probably jumping ahead, but in the Roman government, it was very much about keeping hierarchies, keeping people where they belong. And if this religion was going to come in and mess this up, then they were going to fight against it and they were going to forbid it. So what they're doing is basically saying, no, that the structure that, you know, you're living under with the emperors and with the family, the way the family is to be put together, we're telling you how to make, you know, what Peter is saying. I want you to do it better. You know, I want you to do it better than even the Romans have it all laid out for you, and that kind of thing. But we'll probably, I don't know where it was. I kind of highlighted it, but we haven't gotten to it. But on 171, the author says, what type of excellent behavior did Peter ask of his readers? And again, we use this word submit in the last chapter, and she really went into a lot of detail of explaining it. It does not mean obey. It means really just submitting to one another, allowing each other to be who they are, giving like room for someone else to speak.
Renouncing our will and allowing someone else
to have. And she gives like a whole, and I couldn't remember where it was, but she actually gives the very definition of the word. But he first asks everyone to submit themselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution. I know you read some of this, but he then tells servants to be submissive, not only to good masters, but those who are unreasonable. And he urges wives to be submissive to their unbelieving husbands. And finally, he asks husbands to honor their wives, which in a way is in return submit as well.
Right. It's a mutual submission both ways.
Yeah.
She begins then, she says, Peter's central point was that his readers should be purposeful in how they lived, knowing their actions would communicate the content of their faith to an unbelieving world. He was asking them to keep from muddying the waters and allow unimpeded view of Christ in us. And that's at the bottom of page 170.
That was good. I had that highlighted. Because, you know, I tend to be keeping up on current events, the things that are going on right now. And when you're on social media, everybody has an opinion and everybody wants to put that opinion on there. And there are some people who are really, excited about living out their lives the way kind of Charlie Kirk did and that kind of thing. And someone, and I mean, and granted, there are people who put Trump on a pedestal and call him, you know, savior. I mean, they go too far with their adoration. And some people, there are Christians out there who believe that the whole thing with Charlie Kirk has gone too far. And that I heard one person on TikTok say, well, he's the golden calf everybody's worshiping. And, but I also think that did you view part of the memorial service?
I did. Yeah. I watched Michael W. Smith sing, and I'm telling you what, I had goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you watched, I didn't watch it all. I was getting ready for the Feast of Trumpets.
And I watched his wife. I did watch his wife.
Yes, I did too.
I watched a little bit of Trump, but honestly, I didn't watch the whole thing.
I didn't either. Yeah. But there was a distinct difference between the pastors and the people in the Christian community.
Right.
That spoke, and then the politicians.
Yes.
And the government people. So we have to put them in two groups.
Yeah.
These people were only coming to basically highlight his accomplishments, and basically what every funeral is, talk about how great the person was.
Right.
That you are eulogizing.
Eulogizing. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then you have the gospel message. If you can see it as two separate groups, and what do you do at a funeral anyway? You talk about the person that has died and the impact of their life on you. And that's what was going on. But you have to keep it separated. There were people coming from a very biblical point of view, the gospel, and wanting others to hear the gospel. And then there were those politicians and political people who were coming from a whole different place. So I just think that we could get really critical about things, and that's not glorifying God.
Right.
When we start doing that, because just like you read, that is such a good point that she makes, that Peter is making. So don't muddy the waters.
Right.
We
have enough challenges. Christianity or biblical worldview has enough trouble.
Yeah. Don't muddy the waters.
Muddy the waters.
Just let it go and be happy that people are finding the Lord, and you know, and pray for those people, because now they have to find a body of believers to learn from, and to hopefully good people who will disciple them. That's what we need to be praying about. So that I feel is part of the message that's here, even though it's not the whole message here.
Yeah. She, on the next page, way down at the bottom, and I don't want to skip over that, but she says we have the power to compel or repel people who are looking for God.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's really good. Yeah. And was that on 172 or
Yeah, right at the bottom, very bottom, right onto the top of 173.
Oh, so, there it is. Yep, I see it now. Yeah. I probably read it and didn't mark it. I should have marked that. But it's very, very true. You see people who bring other people in, and then you see others. There are Christians I know who repel me. Like, if that's, I hope I don't act and sound like you, kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's very important that we represent him to, like she goes on, we're here to represent him to a world living in darkness and despair. We need to be the light. We don't jump on everybody else's bandwagon and tear everybody down. So,
okay.
Anyway, that's my rant.
She also kind of mentions, like, she calls it bookends, but as we have studied, we've begun to realize it's actually a chiasm structure. Yeah. So she says, there's these main points that are bookending both the beginning and the end of Peter's passage, but then she doesn't come out and say it. She only says it in her footnote, but it's actually a chiasm is being set up so that you have this, one point parallels this, the next, the top point parallels the bottom point, and they parallel each other until you get to one center verse that is the main idea of this whole passage. And
yeah, and it's kind of long because it starts in 13, 2:13, and goes to 3:7. Right. So it's kind of long, but it's a chiasm. The whole section is
the whole thing. Yeah. So the first point is submit yourself to the Lord, for the Lord's sake, and then that parallels husbands, show your wives honor and as fellow heirs of God. So submitting to each other. So the whole point there is submitting to each other. And then the next point is servants, be subject to your masters, and then which would be a hierarchical submission. And then wives, be subject to your own husband. And again, in that society, that would have been a hierarchical submission. But the main point that all this is emphasizing is because Christ also suffered for you. So even if you're submitting to a bad master, or if you're submitting to a non-believing husband, we're not talking about violence, but Christ also suffered. He understood who he was submitting to, right? Leaving you an example so that you would follow in his steps. So, and all we're saying is the idea of submission, where it's not all about you, and you are able to, be quiet and humble and allow someone else, to have their needs fulfilled or met.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I the one on, did you move over to 175?
Not yet. Nope.
Okay, good. Because on 174, just the quote I read, Matthew. 1 Peter 2:17, honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. And she goes on to say, by doing this, they will silence the ignorance of foolish men, who could make Christianity as a political movement threatening their society.
Right.
And Christianity shouldn't be a political movement.
It really shouldn't. No.
We should be out there trying to change bad.
Right.
By voting biblically, voting according to the God standard of things, we can change the climate. So.
Right. Okay. You want to have a point on 175 that you had underlined?
Yeah. So 175, yes. So in Colossians, right there in the middle of the page, Paul makes it clear that submission is actually to their God, not people.
Yeah, she talks a lot about this point.
Yeah, you already said about the bookends.
Yeah, well, in the example that Jesus gives, he didn't submit to people. He didn't submit to Pontius Pilate or to the mob. He submitted to the will of God.
Right.
And so that's the example. And so she really drives that home, saying, it's not that Paul wants us to submit to a husband or to a master or anything like that, but we're submitting to God so that God's will be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not easy. When I was young, in my early 20s, I worked for a hospital, but it was, I won't even say because you would know it. But anyway, it was very difficult. I had a very, 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 very difficult boss, and I don't say that lightly. I'd never had anybody like her ever since I've been working in my life. But she was very manipulative. And I was young. I was naive. I was like, I had never encountered such a person in my life. But I had an ulcer. I physically had an ulcer because it was so much stress. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I dreaded going to work. And every time I tried to leave, the Lord would stop me and make me stay with her at that job. And we were a small lab, so there were only 3 of us in the lab. And I was the one that the other 2 ganged up on. And difficult job, but the Lord just, I had to pray every day. I had to submit my will to him and allow him to rule where I worked, when I quit, what I did, because he wouldn't let me quit until he gave me the, very clear. He's like, you're done. And, but I had to work there for 2 years with really kind of an abusive boss, not physically, but emotionally. And so anyway, my point is just that, yeah, that's hard. It's hard. And it took me actually years to heal from that experience.
Oh my goodness.
Because even when I started a new job, after that, I had a great boss. And I remember going in and telling him I'm like, okay, it's like, 4:30, I'm supposed to be off now. And is it okay if I go? And he just looks at me. He goes, what did your last job do to you?
Oh, no.
And I go,
yikes.
Why? He goes, Stephanie, you are free to leave when your work's done.
Oh, my goodness.
To come and ask me. And he wasn't being mean.
Yeah.
He was really being sympathetic.
Recognized your trauma.
Yeah, you've been traumatized by your boss, and he could see it. He would do so much to encourage me and build me up because he saw I was like a totally defeated person.
Wow.
So it happens. So I'm just saying it happens. It happens to the best of us. It happens to people. We're in terrible situations where we have to put up with terrible people over us. Yeah. And, I think there would be less people nowadays who would tolerate that for that long. Yeah. But the Lord told me I couldn't, like literally every time I tried to find a new job, he would say no. And so anyway, I think it's difficult, but I had to submit to her and I had to learn. I had to learn that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I know that it's a hard thing to read through this for marriages. And we've said this before, we are not promoting submitting to any kind of abuse or anything like that. You can have a gentle and quiet spirit and walk away. You can, there are ways to handle things without putting yourself in an unsafe position or being the antagonist of making a situation worse or accepting people that are blowing through boundaries.
Despite what some denominations would tell you, you do not have to put up with physical abuse, and God does not expect you to put up with physical abuse.
I agree. I think if anything, we've learned from this book that it is mutual submission and it's mutual headship or mutual authority, whether it's a physical authority or experience authority or there's different ways to have authority, and it's mutual respect and it's a mutual submission, to each other. So just as much as I'm
honoring way.
Right. And as much as I'm expected to submit to my husband, there are times that they are to submit to us as well. So it's a mutual thing. So.
Yeah, because we all have our own talents and giftings, and you have to recognize those talents and giftings.
Exactly.
And so and often, like we've said before, you and I, if you know something better than I do, then it's like, why don't you explain that? Because you got it, you understand it. And so that's submitting.
Yeah.
I submit when she has knowledge I don't. And she submits when she thinks I know something more than her,
Stephanie knows way more than I do. Yes. Well, I think we have a good segue into it because right at the bottom of 175 it says, "What does Peter mean by submit?" So, and this is where, it's the word hypotasso, and she has mentioned this in a previous chapter, and she basically is saying submission is not obedience. It is defined as a readiness to renounce one's own will for the sake of others and to give precedence to others. So it's just, I've always described it as, the word meek even. It's just kind of bowing and just kind of honoring someone else and allowing them to have the honor and not have to be the center of the attention.
Yeah, it's not all about you. It's not all about me.
Right.
So that's good. And he says here, like you've been saying, we saw Paul urging the Philippian church to mutually submit.
Right.
And so he or she, the author, quotes Philippians 2:2-4.
Right.
But then she goes on to say, but here's Peter's additional thrust. That attitude of submission is important even to people who are not mutually submitting to you.
Right.
That includes governments, authorities, hard-hearted employers, She says, "Master."
And husbands who are not believers,
unbelieving,
right? And it's not. I mean, that doesn't indicate that that's an abusive marriage, but it's just they're not believers.
Yeah.
And so
they don't want to go to church. They don't want to go, or they don't want to do the feast, or they don't want to keep the Sabbath. Whatever.
Yeah.
We both know people who have been in, more Torah observant, and their Christian husband did not want anything to do with the Torah movement.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. So but all these women that I've ever met in this situation still submitted to their husbands.
Right.
And then what happened? It may have taken years. And in the case of one woman I actually know, it took 14 years, but then her husband started following Torah.
That's wonderful.
Because she submitted to him. She didn't make him. She didn't bug him. She didn't pound him over the head with it. And he eventually saw it for himself and started keeping Torah.
Right.
So I think we can do that, whether you have an unbelieving husband or spouse, or you have just a spouse that doesn't follow you into something more.
Right.
So
she does make a good point next, and she gives several bullet points of what was Peter's general attitude towards women. So she pulls in several scriptures in First Peter, Second Peter. I mean, she goes through a bunch, really talking about it. And it's both are redeemed with the blood, so that everybody, that's an equal thing. Peter expected both men and women to long for the pure milk of the word and to mature and to grow. All believers are living stones being built up as a spiritual house. So men and women. Men and women are part of the holy priesthood and a people of God's own possession. That's
right. That's not gender oriented there.
Right. And then Peter finally tells husbands and wife that and we read this, they're fellow heirs. Men and women share equally with Christ in the inheritance. No one is valued above the other. So there's lots of references in the books that Peter wrote that lets us know how he feels about believers, regardless of their gender.
Yeah, I think this popped into my mind, and it may be totally inappropriate, but I think there's going to be men in heaven. I think there's going to, now let me just rephrase that. I'm not saying that I think there's going to be men in heaven. There's more to that. But I think that there's going to be teachers in heaven that still teach. Yeah. While we will follow Yeshua wholeheartedly, and he will be the main person that we follow and honor and love, I think we still have roles that we play in the new heavens and new earth. And I think that there will be female teachers and male teachers. And I think that we will see everyone as equal. And I think that some of these men will have their eyes opened when Yeshua uses people like us, females, to in his kingdom in the days to come, so I think it's people's eyes will be opened in some ways.
I think our eyes are going to be open in a lot of ways. I think we've misunderstood a whole lot.
Yeah, and all of us, not just one gender, all of us will have our eyes open, because things that we think, we believe that are,
I think,
really are either not significant, untrue, or
or they
never existed,
need to be changed.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions. I have a long list. I have a lot of questions.
I'm hoping he just kind of gives some downloads immediately.
Yeah, we can just we do podcasts up there as we're walking around on our golden streets. That's when I listen. Okay, so there is. I don't want to jump ahead. So if there's anything else,
no, we're good. We can move on to how does the example of Sarah add to Peter's call to submit?
Yeah, she made a couple of good points here.
Yeah.
Because the reference is Sarah even submitted to Abraham, and she makes the point, Abraham submitted to Sarah too, because it was Sarah's harebrained idea to have a son with Hagar. So how did that work? But Abraham submitted. He was mutually submitted to her.
Yeah.
But also, he protected her, even though Abraham sold her.
I know.
Well, Pharaoh took her. They didn't sell her, but Pharaoh took her.
Yeah, two different men. One was a Pharaoh, one was Amalek, or somebody like that. I forgot. Mm-hmm. I always say his name wrong, so sorry if I messed that up.
Right. And then also, she made the point that when Sarah heard she was going to have a son, she kind of laughed at it. And so the whole thing of trusting Abraham is you got to trust the process. Don't take it into your own hands. Don't take it into my own hands, but you're trusting the process. And she kind of says this on page 178. It says, by faith, even Sarah received the ability to conceive even beyond the proper time of life, since she considered him faithful who promised. And the him is God, not Abraham him. That right. She trusted God as faithful who promised. And so Peter is asking wives to follow her example in trusting God's process.
Absolutely.
And trusting God, right? It's not that Sarah submitted to Abraham and the whole plan and everything, but she believed God. She believed what God said about the promise.
And I think it's hard because I know we both have daughters and sons, and but for me, my none of my kids are married, and they're getting into their late 20s, and they're like, why? And it's hard because you want to tell them trust the plan of God, but that sometimes that's just like, yeah, whatever. Even though they love Jesus and they follow him, it's still like, Mom, don't tell me that. Don't tell me. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
And so you have to be careful. You don't just give them more Christian ease. And sometimes I just say I don't understand it either.
Right.
I don't understand what God's doing. And when I pray for them, I'm like, Lord, I don't understand. How can I comfort my kids that you haven't brought a spouse that you've given us all the desire to want families, to want a partner, to want children, it's like, so trusting you with it is what we're told to do. But I see how hard it is for them because nothing's happening.
Yes.
And the people they do meet are shallow.
Yes.
And they don't want that either. So, my daughter gets ghosted by men when she's like, I'm in, how do you feel about women in leadership? The very same things we've been talking about in this book. Yeah. And then when she gives her opinion, she doesn't hear from them again. So
yeah. Both of my girls have had problems with conception and having children. I mean, it's that's something that's very, very difficult for both of them. And it's not the dream, that's not the dream they wanted. Yeah. So it's hard to be encouraging without sounding like Christianese. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
But we all, in one way or another, have to we have to trust God's purposes. So.
We do. And even, I can even say that for us too, Stephanie, because we've been called to be writers and authors, and that's a long process, and who knows why God would pick us to do something like that. And of course I would love to write a blockbuster hit, but why would you make me go through that, God? And then my book comes out in the middle of COVID, right? And it's it's not that it was a flop. It wasn't.
No, it wasn't at all.
Why couldn't it be more? So we don't understand the process. We don't understand.
But at the same time, we're both very. We love God's word, and we love teaching God's word. Yes. So to write a blockbuster novel is not in our wheelhouse. I mean, you could probably do it, but it's not our calling. Let's put it that way. Not mine, at least. Even when I started teaching at writers' conferences, I mean, I remember coming home from a writers' conference, and I was driving home, and the Lord just basically said, "That's not what I called you to do.
Oh wow!
I didn't call you to teach writing.
Oh wow!
I called you to teach my word."
Oh wow!
So it was really hard because I loved going to the conferences. And it doesn't mean I can't, but teaching was also a way to kind of help the cost of the conference.
Yeah.
So
yes, yes, I know that.
Yeah. So anyway,
okay.
just little tangents there. But
yeah,
the bottom of 178, she basically defines the word gentle, which is the same as what's in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek. So the word gentle and meek are the same Greek word in in both Peter and Matthew.
right.
And she said, meekness is not weakness. It's voluntarily placing one's power under someone else's control.
Right.
In this case, it's
submission. Yeah, that's submission.
Yeah.
It's very, very similar to submission.
Yeah. And it's a wife giving over her power, not to her husband, but to God.
But to God, right.
Trusting he will do the right thing by her. Quiet can also mean tranquil.
Right.
So at peace. So together, meek and tranquil make an attitude of peaceful submission to God, because one trusts him completely. So
that's right. Okay. So the next question is, well, what does Peter tell the husbands? And he does begin his instructions with, you husbands in the same way. So everything that he had said to wives and to masters and slaves and everything in the same way, husbands in the same way. So nothing new, nothing's really changed, but he's saying in the same way, you need to serve your wives.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. Godly submission is expressed by giving honor to their wives. Yes. They should treat their wives with an understanding and give her the same grace that they would give themselves. She may not be as physically strong or as big as him, but she is his equal. So, and fellow heir. And
right.
fellow heir.
Right. And I think even it's hard to imagine that, because even our children, we think that it's like, well, I'm the parent, but in God's kingdom, we're all equal.
Yeah.
Our children, no matter what their age is at the time that we enter God's kingdom, they are brothers and sisters in Christ as well as our husbands.
Right.
And when we mistreat them, when we, it's just a terrible thing, because, I don't know. I mean, we don't often think of our children as being co-heirs.
Right. Yeah, very good. She does say, finally, Peter summarizes his example on submission with a statement for all believers. To sum up, all of you, be harmonious, be sympathetic, loving, compassionate, and humble. That's verse 8 in the NASB. These descriptions augment our understanding of what he has just been asking of his readers. The most effective way to demonstrate the heart of God for unbelievers is by interacting in love. So she's got a good point there.
Yeah.
She said, if we're to, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but this is over on 181. If we're to enact the same principles of servanthood today, I dare say the expression would look far different from Jesus's first century application. Today, if I asked a guest in my home to take off my shoes, they're talking washing their feet and stuff. If I asked them to take off their shoes, so I could wash their feet, it would likely feel like a violation of privacy or an intrusion of personal space. But to follow Jesus's example in servanthood today might look more like bringing someone a meal or giving a monetary gift or an anonymous, sweeping the floor or washing the dishes. So she's saying, he gave us the example. We should be following his example. So obviously people today would freak out if we asked him to feet, but he was that humble of a servant.
Yeah. A neighbor of mine was telling me that when they lived in Colorado, I believe, they had a small group of people that they were very good friends with. They did everything. They worshiped the Lord together. They were all like-minded. And one of the families went on vacation, and they were in Hawaii, so they were pretty far away. It takes a bit of doing to get back. And their house, something flooded in the basement. So something happened. I don't really know why, exactly what, but they had a flood in their house. And one of the other couples, and maybe more than one, but they went in and cleaned up the whole mess, pulled up all the wet carpeting, and took it outside. So when they came home, of course, they still had things they had to do, but the water was cleaned up and the house was drying.
Oh, wow.
And I thought like, wow, that's service.
That's service.
Really serving one another and really helping those people like, you know, what you're saying. I mean, you may not be washing their feet, but that's huge to go and do that, you know, and help your friends or help your neighbors out that way.
I agree. Okay. Any other we have about 2 minutes.
Yep.
Any other last point?
Not really. I don't have anything. I did like the last quote. She talked about the NFL. So
I liked it. Yeah, I did like that one.
She said she's talking about Rosie Greer, and that he was keenly aware of being in the public eye. So he knew who he was, so that he knew the position he was in to influence others. Mm-hmm. And he said she writes, he once spoke to a group of NFL recruits about their influence as sports heroes. Right. One recruit spoke out in protest. I don't want to be a role model. He said, son, when you accepted the NFL draft, you stepped into that position. The only thing you have to decide now is what kind of role model you're going to be. Yeah. And she said the reality of this is truth for believers in Christ. God has decided to reveal himself in this present age through his church or his congregation. That's right. We are called to live lives that reflect who we are in Christ to the world around us.
Right.
So like it or not, we are all on display. And so you can either be a good representative of him or an awful one.
Right.
Or a mediocre one. You know, we have our choices, but I think we should all strive to be a good representative of him.
That's right. Okay. Well, we have officially finished, and we are going to start.
Great book.
Yeah, it is a good book. We're going to start the book of Romans next week. So there's a lot in there, but you just have a Bible. Just have a Bible.
All you need is a Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to read the commentaries. We're going to bring in what we've learned. So.
We are. And I've already started. So yeah, it's a lot. All right. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you. And Stephanie, I'll let you've got all the controls over on your end. So
thank
you for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
If you missed today's show and want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.